Hey there, Mr. Redder here. Welcome back to another episode of r/entitled People Stories. Our first story we'll be reading today. Neighbor trespassed on my property twice to turn off my outdoor lighting. After that, shady boss lied about my position to keep me from policy-allowed benefit for years. I found out and it changed everything. And after that, am I the jerk for refusing to make my husband apologize for what he said to my mom at dinner? Now for every thumbs up this video gets, one Karen does not get to turn off her neighbor's lights. I will if they're keeping me from sleeping. So please smash that like button and subscribe and turn on notifications for new stories from Reddit every single day. Neighbor trespassed on my property twice to turn off my outdoor lighting. Some backstory. We moved in about 6 months ago, first house in California. There are some soft lights around the house for security. I keep them at 1% brightness. Only time this neighbor has said anything to us was to shout at us about cutting down some trees. The trees were dying anyway. He's never talked to us about the light being a nuisance. I'm guessing it's more visible now without the trees, but again, he's never said anything to us about it. The last 2 weekends, I've caught him on video entering our property, going over a short 4-foot fence and unscrewing our light bulb. The second time, the fixture was completely broken and will need to be replaced. He tried to shield his face from our garage security camera while entering the property, but must not have known the other camera was there. My video is clear as day. He left our property with his finger up while his back was to the garage camera. We can't really afford a tall fence right now, but it's on my list ASAP. In the meantime, this has been giving me a lot of anxiety. I already have a lot. It scares me that someone would be willing to trespass on and vandalize our property without talking to us about it at all. I'm not sure what he'd do if I confront him and tell him that I have a video of him. I want to avoid violence or any further damage to my property or loved ones, and all I've seen is an angry man who doesn't care about the rules. I called the sheriff, who said the neighbor is 100% in the wrong and offered to come by to tell him it's an arrestable crime if he's caught again. I'm just not sure I should jump to that first. Seems so crazy that someone thinks this is okay. Stresses me out, and I could really use some advice on how to handle this. My priorities are, in order, keep my family, pets, and property safe, stop this from happening ever again, peace. Would be nice to avoid prolonged confrontation if at all possible. I don't want to live with stress, but seems like this one is impossible. So, the guy never talked to you, save for yelling at you, trespassed twice on your property, and destroyed your property on the second time he committed the crime. Listen, there's an old saying, only commit one crime at a time. Let's count his crimes at the moment. 1. Trespassing. 2. Destruction of property. Get the sheriff involved. Well, what would you do in this situation? Would you call the cops on your neighbor or not? Please let us know. To be honest, someone would probably have to call the cops on me, bruh. Shady boss lied about my position to keep me from policy-allowed benefits for years. I found out and it changed everything. A few years ago, I worked at a big retail company and had for many years. Eventually, I went through enough grad school education to get my license to work at a higher level. Much more pay, more job satisfaction, more responsibilities, fancy title, but the job market was rough. I stayed on with my company to work in a floater position, where I would cover a large area and work at all the stores within that area on a rotating but irregular basis. Eventually, I wanted to get a staff position where I have a single store assigned. The area was huge, the furthest store being over 100 miles from my house, and that is exactly where I was assigned to train for the new role. It was a rough store. Folks in my position were robbed and assaulted. Neighborhood was very unfriendly. Volume at the store was among the highest in the state. Staff turnover was, as you might expect, extreme. Well, after training, I wasn't really being scheduled to float to other stores. Once a month at most. I asked to be scheduled a little more diversely, since most of the stores in my area were much closer to my home and didn't require 4 hours of driving a day. Boss man told me that I was the only floater experienced enough to handle that store. I didn't buy it, but what can you do, right? Well, a colleague told me about the mileage reimbursement policy. Floaters working at a store more than 50 miles from home can file for reimbursement of mileage over that 50 miles each way. Can even include meals. So I filled out a few of these and sent them to my boss to sign. He didn't quite refuse, but he never actually signed and filed them. I suspect as soon as I left his office at our district center, he tossed them out. Boss man tells me later that they must be lost in the system. Eventually, the same colleague showed me how to fax those same forms to accounts payable, bypassing the district boss man. So I started doing just that. One day, boss man calls me in a panic. He wants to stop my filing the forms. I asked to be floated closer to home, but he won't budge. He needs me at that miserable store. He promises me he'll make me a staff role at that store if I promise to stop faxing those forms. Staff roles are a promotion and usually come with better pay and a few other little conveniences, so I agree. Boss man says there won't be a pay bump right away, but that it'll come down the road. That never happened. 2 years later, the situation at the store has become too toxic for even me. I asked to step down from the staff position to be a floater again and be allowed to float to other stores. Boss man says that I am already a floater, never was in a staff position, but that he can't let me work at any other stores because it's better for me and the customers if I stay there for familiarity. Floaters do not get scheduled to stores exclusively, so I'm being singled out because they are still desperate to cover that dump of a store. I'm livid, so I start looking. It took me months, but eventually I found an opportunity to make my dream career transition. I put in my formal notice, and that's when the fun started. Remember that whole mileage reimbursement policy? Well, I kept meticulous track of all my shifts, and there is no statute of limitations baked into the policy, so I started filling out those reimbursements forms to retroactively cover every single shift from the past 2 odd years. I skipped the meal part since I didn't want to go through all that effort of finding receipts. I had a friendly store manager sign off on them, and I started sending them to accounts payable directly again. I didn't fax them all in at once, but for each shift in my final 2 weeks, I faxed a few dozen in. We still have fax machines in that line of work, believe it or not. I figured, what do I have to lose? Worst case scenario, accounts payable declines the forms. On my last few shifts, I started getting the checks from accounts payable. Not added to my paycheck, but sent to me directly. Mileage reimbursements are not taxable income, so this was all tax-free money coming to me. It must have taken a while for the charges to show up on a balance sheet because a few weeks after my final paycheck, I got a call from my now former boss man. He wasn't happy. He got some big loss prevention manager involved, and together they started saying I was breaking some rule by requesting the payments. They specifically claimed I was ineligible because I agreed I wouldn't be eligible in a staff position. They then threatened legal action against me if I didn't remit the full amounts back that same week. But I had the email chain from when boss man said I was never staff and always a floater. I politely referenced that email chain before letting them know firmly that because I was lied to, our prior agreement didn't apply and I was fully eligible all along. Corporate policy, as confirmed by HR, agreed with me, so I let them know I wasn't returning a single penny. In the end, the reimbursements amounted to well over $21,000, and I transitioned into my dream job. I could say that I would trade that money back for the time I lost commuting to that miserable store, 4 hours every shift. But all that pressure motivated me to making the best career move of my life. The great satisfaction of not only professionally surpassing my old boss, but getting to tell him that his lies cost him way more on the way out is almost priceless. I also shared my story and method with many colleagues who were being told wrongly by the boss man that they didn't qualify for this policy. Edit 1. Thank you all for the support and comments. As many of you correctly guessed, I was working as a community pharmacist. I do want to clarify that most of my coworkers, technicians, pharmacists, front-end staff, and customers and patients were amazing people. Between them and my subscription to Audible with a long list of books I always wanted to read, it made the situation such that I could tolerate that commute for all that time. The job market for retail pharmacy was/is also very rough, and I can't overstate that enough. It has empowered big chains to mistreat their staff in this and other ways, and that also endangers patient care, not to mention staff mental health. I spent more than 10 months searching before I found an opportunity, and that involved me leaving the profession entirely. The district manager, boss man, and the store general manager, who was fully complicit in the lie, are both still working for the company last I saw. Moral of the story: please understand your company policies and ignore any verbal agreements or HR unsupported decrees otherwise, and be kind to your pharmacy staff. The job and companies are not always kind to them. Am I the jerk for refusing to make my husband apologize for what he said to my mom at dinner? So I, female 31, recently got married to my husband, Scott, male 36. Before I met him, I was engaged to my former fiancé, Martin. But we broke it off because this relationship was sort of pushed by my family because he's a doctor and comes from a wealthy family. When our relationship ended, my mom was devastated. She did her best to bring us back together. For example, she lied to Martin about me being pregnant to save us. That was years ago. Now we're all on good terms, including Martin. Mom has a bit of tension towards Scott. She treats him well, but constantly makes passive, nagging comments about him. She compares him to Martin all the time, which bothers both of us, but we try to let it slide. Mom kept telling Scott about the diamond ring, new car, and bank account Martin got for his fiancée, and kept sending him photos saying how generous Martin is to his fiancée, then compared him to Scott and what he had done for me. I told her stop doing this, and she apologized. Last week, we were over at my parents' house for a social gathering. Lots of relatives came, and we had dinner. At the dinner table, Mom asked Scott if he saw the text she sent him the other day. He said he was sorry and that he didn't see it. She told him to check it right then and read it out loud so everyone at the dinner table could hear. He took his phone and started reading the text out loud. Her text mentioned how Martin got his fiancée a new house and how generous he was, then said that Martin is younger than Scott, yet was able to buy a house. Basically shaming Scott for his inability to buy a house. She wrapped up by saying that Martin maybe wasn't so bad for me after all. I was shocked, and Scott was upset, obviously. However, he didn't lash out or anything. He looked at the text, smiled, and said, "You know, what gets me about this entire text is how you were a public educator for 30 years, yet you can't differentiate between the passive, you, and the contradiction, your. Goodness, the thought of all the kids that must have been left behind." Everyone at the table burst into laughter, and Mom's face went pale. She decided to leave the table, then she and my sister started yelling at me, saying Scott was being awfully rude and I need to get him to apologize immediately for embarrassing Mom at the table. I refused to tell him to apologize, then pointed out how she was being judgmental towards him. She defended herself, saying that she was just letting him know and he had no confidence and took it personally. I left, but kept getting told to talk to him and get him to apologize for what he did. "You're the jerk. Why are you letting your mom treat your husband this way? Yes, your husband handled it like a champ, but grow a spine and tell your mom in no uncertain terms to cut it out." Right? How the heck is reading the passive-aggressive text from Mom going to turn out well for him? The husband could have said no, but OP's mom got what she deserved. I have to say, you're the jerk for brushing your mom's behavior to the side. Stop being around that type of nastiness. If I were your husband, I would have put my foot down. No more of your mom's visits. If she comes over, and no more visiting. If you want to go, go alone. You obviously have not done enough to put your mom in her place. If the tables were turned, you would want to be defended against your in-laws. You're the jerk for even thinking Scott might need to apologize to your mom. You're the jerk for not shutting your mom down a long time ago. Your mom is a total jerk who needs to be the one apologizing for her appalling behavior. Your sister is a jerk for siding with your bullying mom. Scott is a gem and not the jerk. He's brilliant. Am I the jerk for taking away my brother's birthday cake after he had paid for it? My brother, Rob, is a self-proclaimed prankster. He loves pulling pranks on everyone, including strangers. His pranks, in my opinion, aren't funny and may land him in serious trouble in the future. His pranks are just antagonizing someone until he gets bored and then calling it a prank. Rob's behavior has seriously affected my relationship with him. When I first started dating my wife, Haley, he made it a habit at every gathering I would attend with her to prank her. Not just an average whoopee cushion or rubber snake, like hiding her glasses for hours on end or pouring vinegar in her tea. He claims he does it to make Hallie less posh and uptight. My family is like him as well, a bunch of self-proclaimed jokesters. I don't speak to them much. My wife, Hallie, gave birth to our beautiful son 6 months ago. According to my family, we've been rationing our family visits. The first time they saw our son was when he was 4 months, and they haven't seen him since. My family isn't very happy with this arrangement, and they've been spamming me with calls, texts, and even emailing me, asking, begging to see the baby. They want weekly or even daily visits, but that just isn't possible. Rob invited us for his 30th birthday and asked Haley to make his birthday cake. Not just any basic, simple vanilla cake, but one of those fancy, detailed, decorated cakes that requires lots of time and effort. I was hesitant to go, and even more hesitant to let Haley bake him the cake. But Haley assured me that it would be all right, and attending the birthday might ease my family off our back. Rob paid her up front for the cake that he specifically wanted. Haley also made cupcakes just because she wanted to. Haley and I arrived at my brother's house earlier than everyone else, and when everyone arrived, I was pleasantly surprised to see how well the whole thing was going. They were very excited to meet my son, and they were very respectful towards Haley. Rob kept telling Haley to watch her back. I had no idea he meant it literally. While my wife was handling the cake, he came up behind her and poured cold water all over her. This obviously scared her a little and caused her to drop the cake. Rob got extremely upset, claiming that she dropped the cake on purpose. Haley started to apologize for dropping the cake while water was all over her, but I wasn't having any of it, and I admittedly lost my temper a little. I yelled at Rob for being so irresponsible and irrational, grabbed the cupcakes that Haley had made, which were untouched, and left with my family. It was a little dramatic. The next day, I woke up to a string of angry texts from Rob, telling me I had no right to take the cupcakes away from him because he had rightfully paid for them, and this wouldn't have happened if Haley could handle a little cold water. Haley thinks that I should at least apologize in the hopes that it would make everything go away. Not the jerk. Your family sucks. Tell Rob that it's obviously his fault that Haley dropped the cake. Pranks are not funny, and his idea of pranks are just bullying. Tell your family that since they seem incapable of treating you and your family with any respect or decency, that you will be taking a break from them. Explain that this break will last at least until you and your wife receive a sincere apology from Rob and a promise to cut his crap out from now on, and an acknowledgement from others that Rob's behavior and treatment of your wife is unacceptable. Not the jerk. More importantly, the brother needs therapy. He's a grown man that acts like a kid wanting attention and will go so far as to ruin his own birthday cake, and relationship with his brother to get it. Tell your parents this crap is the reason they don't see your kid. They can't be trusted. Yes, absolutely. Self-proclaimed jokesters are just mean people hiding behind prankster mask. Not the jerk. Is your brother 6? He sounds exhausting and very unpleasant. So does the rest of your family. Your wife sounds like a saint. Oh, and self-proclaimed jokesters or pranksters are usually just bullies. Your brother sure is. Am I the jerk for telling my husband his name suggestion for our unborn baby is idiotic at best? Hello all. This has caused quite a stir on both sides of the family, and my niece suggested I post this here so as to garner unbiased opinions. Unfortunately, as it is relevant to the story, I will have to keep much personal information uncensored in this story. As such, this is a throwaway account. Me, 35 female, and my husband, 37 male, are pregnant with our first child. We are overjoyed as we have struggled with this for the last decade. We want the gender to be a surprise, but may have to find out to settle this. I'm currently at the tail end of my second trimester. Now, my husband absolutely idolized his grandpa, who unfortunately passed only last week. My husband is brokenhearted, especially about the notion that his kids will never meet their great-grandpa, who their father adored so much. As such, my husband has suggested that we name the baby after grandpa. Theodore if it's a boy, Theodora if it's a girl. Either way, we will either call them Teddy or Theo or Thea respectively. It's not that I mind the name. The issue is that our last name is Bundy. I asked my husband, do you really see no issue in naming our kid Teddy followed by our last name? You don't think that that would raise any concerns? He says no, he's just honoring his grandpa. I told him he needs to think about how this will be perceived, how our kid will be treated, and the implications that the name inherently carries. I literally had to spell out why that would be a horrible idea, and he still thinks I just don't like his grandpa. I told him no, grandpa was named in 1930 when this name wouldn't have been a problem. However, since certain events in the 70s and 80s, there's no feasible way we can give this name to our kid and not cause issues. He kept pushing and pushing until I blew up and told him to stop with the idiotic suggestion. And that's what it is, idiotic at best. He got extremely upset and told his family and my parents, who are divided. His family is obviously on his side and wants to honor grandpa via naming the baby after him. My parents are torn, but on my side, as they understand the social pariah we would make our kid by giving them such a similar name to the person who did such bad things. I mean, personally, I don't think anyone is just going to assume that we are honoring a past loved one. They're just going to think of the criminal. Am I the jerk? Edit. Just to say that you guys are all proving my point that his name is clearly still infamous. There has not been one comment that didn't immediately make the correlation upon hearing my last name. That is exactly what I don't want to have happen to my kid. Kids are jerks, and they're gonna find a way to be mean. Let's not just hand them the material. Not the jerk. I have a friend who has a very similar name to a well-known criminal. He has to wind up basically apologizing for his name wherever he goes, even though he has absolutely no relation to the guy. It's pretty sad. There are many ways you can honor your husband's grandfather without giving the baby such an unfortunate name. Well, what do you think? Do you agree with OP or her husband? Please let us know. Am I the jerk for paying for another bride's wedding dress, but not my daughter's? My husband and I worked hard and managed to become financially secure adults after both of us grew up in poverty. We raised our kids to work hard. We did not spoil them or provide them with a lavish life. As teens, they all had part-time jobs, but we did purchase them their own used cars, which they were required to maintain. We also paid for college, and we paid for our oldest two kids' weddings. However, we were merely the ones paying, and we did not provide any input or suggestions unless asked. The only thing we didn't pay for their weddings was our son's tuxedo and our oldest daughter's wedding dress. Our youngest daughter, Michaela, is engaged, and we are paying for her wedding with the exception of her dress. She must buy her own wedding dress. Michaela invited us to help her pick a dress at her bridal party. She found a beautiful dress in her budget, and we were so honored to have been allowed to take part in her finding the dress and seeing herself as a bride. While there, I complimented another bride on a dress she was wearing, and her mother and I struck up conversation, and I learned that the family were low income, and both the bride and groom and the bride's parents had taken out loans to have a beautiful wedding. The bride is also plus size, and I learned that she has been to 6 different stores, and there had only been a few options for her size, and all of them had just been awful. The bride ended up falling in love with the last dress she tried, but was brokenhearted to learn that the consultant had misread the price tag, and the dress was actually $1,000 over budget, and with alterations to make it her size, it was another $1,400. The bride took the dress and said that she'd try to find something online. I grew up poor, and I was also chubby. I was bullied and I was very unhappy. I always wanted more, and in this bride I saw myself, and I didn't want her to have to settle for a dress that fit versus a dress she loved. So while my daughter was trying a different one, I asked the other bride if I could pay the differences on her dress. It was very emotional. We all held each other and cried. She accepted. I very happily paid the difference on her dress. Her mother, herself, and I are now friends on Facebook, and my husband and I have been invited to the wedding, which we will gladly attend. I felt very honored to have been allowed to help this girl in a small way, and being invited to her wedding was so unexpected and so amazing. When Michaela found out about this, she threw a fit and said that I obviously had shown how I truly feel about her wedding and herself, and if I cared at all, I would have paid for her dress too. She's now not speaking to me or to her father, who didn't even have a hand in this, which is unfair. She has now uninvited us from the wedding. We're so hurt and confused. Was I the jerk? Edit. I wanted to add, Michaela didn't know I'd pay for the dress while we were at the bridal shop. She was in the fitting room doing a last-minute try-on, and I took the opportunity to go to the payment counter during that time. So Michaela didn't lose any of my attention. In fact, we were all done. She had picked her dress, we had celebrated. She wasn't in the same part of the shop as us. She didn't find out until a few hours later at dinner when her dad accidentally revealed it then. He's a little talkative and didn't mean to reveal it. Not the jerk. If Michaela has uninvited you to the wedding, she has obviously uninvited your dollars too. Not the jerk. You were paying for her wedding. The only thing she has to buy herself is her dress. Your daughter is acting very entitled. Tell her you are no longer paying for her wedding as you are no longer invited. I bet she changes her tune real quick. OP. So far, we've paid around $26,000 for the wedding. Maybe we should suggest taking all that back. I think you should at least email her an accounting or funds spent on the wedding to date and what the expected final bill will be. Subject line: Financial Independence Wedding. Good evening, Michaela. While I know you are terribly upset at the costs of your wedding, which were to be borne by your father and I, did not include your wedding gown, I also know that your father and I are equally upset at being excluded from your guest list. You've declared financial independence, for which I applaud you. A talented, intelligent young woman and her equally amazing husband should start off life as fully realized adults, sharing all matters. What I'm sending you now is an updated list of vendors and costs to date, with the approximate remaining costs for the wedding. I will include you and your fiancé on the emails that I sent to them requesting that the ownership and responsible parties for the part of the wedding be transferred to you and your fiancé. Most of the contracts, which your father and I are reviewing, have breakage fees, so we will not be able to recoup all of the costs spent to date. You will need to get in touch with them individually to determine what your revised costs will be after they deduct the non-refundable part of our deposits. I so wish this could have been different, but your father and I feel strongly that we must respect your autonomy and decisions, alongside those of your husband-to-be. With love, Mom. Well, what do you think? Should OP still pay for her daughter's wedding or not? Please let us know. Am I the jerk for not going to Easter because it's always all about the kids? I'm 26, 2 kids, and 4 out of 5 sisters have kids, with the exception of Serena, who is a travel the world with a knapsack kind of gal. I love my family, but every single family outing, get-together, every dinner, lunch, everything has to be family-friendly and kid-centric. I can never get my sisters, other than Serena, when she's even in town, to go to a movie, have lunch, sit and chat without it being all about the kids. Even if the kids are having a kid playtime with each other and the adults are sitting around drinking coffee, the conversations are about the kids. Kids are called over to talk to us, etc., etc. Before lockdown, I asked my sister Julie to come over with me to get our nails done and just have some us time. She changed her mind last minute and said she was bringing her daughter as a bonding activity. We do nothing but bonding activities, and the same thing has happened time and time again. Shopping? The kids need to come. Taking a hike? All on board. I expressed my frustration, and she acted like I was being super out of line, shocked, and went on about how she can't imagine doing things without her mini-me, and that it was weird. It became a whole, "Are you okay? Are you sure? Are you depressed?" thing. The requisite Zoom family things were all about the kids with no adult time, so when we were talking about getting together for Easter, I thought, hey, maybe they'll want to catch up. I asked during a planning call, do you think we can maybe just have some time for the adults when the kids are playing, so we can all catch up? My mom and sisters acted like it was the most ridiculous ask. Mom did the, "Are you okay?" and "I can't imagine wanting to spend time with my family and exclude you girls from any part of it. That's not normal." I said that I really can't sit through another kid-centric get-together, and that if we aren't going to at least do something and sit down and have cake and coffee together and catch up, just the family, then count me out. Well, they went through with it, and I ended up sending the girls over and staying home and having a great time, just me and Serena. She said that she understands how I feel, and she stands with me because they exclude her as well since she doesn't have kids and has been clear that she never will. Of course, she and I are being talked down to and told that we're jerks to treat family like that we should have all been together as a family, and that it's time to grow up and accept that it'll never just be the sisters again. I cried about this a lot. Am I really wrong here? Is this normal and I just need to accept never seeing my other sisters one-on-one without their kids being the focus of everything? Guys, just a couple of points because it keeps coming up. I didn't ask for a kid-free Easter at all. I asked for some time for the adults to drink coffee and catch up with each other while the kids were playing. And I have friends, but family and friends are different. Work is 8 to 4 only. Not me, but my coworker, and I am super proud of them. The past few years, I've been putting up firm boundaries with work after being done over a few times, including not being expected to answer emails or do assignments evenings and weekends. It's taken a long time, but I've learned my worth and that my time is valuable. Our company has about 200 employees, but I work most closely with one other person who I've been encouraging to do the same. We were all put on remote work since last March, and recently the building opened again, with the exception that we would start back in person. I'll give props to them. They've done a ton of work to get the building cleaned, the air filters updated, enforcing masking, etc. However, HR at first talked a lot about how they would be willing to be flexible, since most schools are still closed and people needed childcare worked out, and that they would grant accommodations with people who had health concerns. Yet, that didn't actually play out. In my situation, I had a unique childcare concern that had a simple solution, but they refused to budge. Long story short, I needed to start 30 minutes later and was told no. Several other coworkers have shared similar stories of not getting any flexibility whatsoever. My coworker has several health issues and requested to work on an alternate schedule and was told, "The job is 8 to 4, so that's when you must be here." Understandably, they were upset. We've both been there well over a decade, and it's kind of a slap in the face to dedicate yourself to a place that talks up community and family, and then told no after being promised flexibility. Here's the malicious compliance. The company handles missed time by covering in-house. So for instance, if someone has a meeting at a certain time or calls in sick, someone who has a break or lunch covers them and gets paid a little stipend for it. We're talking like $20, not much. But if you take a few extras over a week, it can add up to a nice little bit in your pay. My coworker coordinates all of this and does it on Sunday for the upcoming week. Even though they don't work on Sunday, they would say it only takes about an hour to do, and it makes everyone's life so much easier since everyone walks in Monday morning knowing who is covering when, so it's worth it. Can you see where this is going? Upset at the lack of accommodation, my coworker decided to take HR's word for it. They stopped sending the coverage email on the weekend and did it at 8 sharp on Monday. It was like the end of the world. Everyone was scrambling. Such a little thing to make life convenient, but they refuse now to do anything outside of work hours. They told me that the following weekend, managers were asking for it throughout Saturday and Sunday, but they ignored the emails. On Monday, they sent it at 8 a.m. sharp again. By the afternoon, the head boss had asked them to please resume doing it on the weekend, and they are now getting the extra hour paid by the company. I loved it. Take care of your employees, and they take care of you. Give a little, get a little. Here's some info asked about in the comments. 1. My coworker doesn't have a disability, but is nearing retirement age and has some minor medical concerns that could make getting sick very complicated. 2. From what I understand, they requested to continue remotely, and I'm not surprised that was denied. While their role could be done at home, with people back in the building, it wouldn't make much sense. They do a lot of the front office stuff, where my role is more in the background. I could do my job no problem going in only once a week, but their role really does need to be on site while people are there. I believe they had asked to do some days at home or half days at home. That would work if HR had let them. 3. It seems from what I have gathered, only 2 people were granted remote accommodations. One person I know has some complicated medical issues, so that made sense to me. Most people asking for flexibility have roles that, like mine, don't necessitate being on site. I was told that my requested accommodation would be unfair because everyone needs to be treated equally, and I get that, except most work with clients and I don't. My role is completely internal support. There are others like me who do back-end stuff or support in other ways who were denied what I consider minor accommodations in the spirit of fairness, but would make life a million times easier. Support our channel by joining as a member today, and we'll give you a shout out in our next video. Or come watch this video next. You won't believe what Karen does in that one.